Hey everyone, so in today's video I'm making a tier list talking about the 2024 Boston Red Sox. Basically, I'm going to be talking about how I feel like they personally performed this year based on my expectations. So this might not be like the national media or what you had in mind for them, but this is kind of what I thought they were going to do this season, and did they meet or exceed them? It's a little bit different than some of the other videos you might have seen out there, so hopefully you guys enjoy this, and yeah, I'll explain my rationale as we kind of go along the way. If you guys also haven't noticed, there's like an inconclusive section like right here. Basically, what that's going to be reserved for is players that I don't feel like fit into any real category, and it's probably due to injury or just missed playing time due to whatever reason. So, yeah, let's jump right into it. So, first player up, we've got Emmanuel Valdez. I'm going to go ahead and stick him straight into below expectations. He very well could be in well below expectations here. But the reason I'm not sticking him there is I didn't really have high expectations of him to begin with. I thought he was going to be kind of like a bench utility guy. I did say, in my preseason video talking about the team, that I thought that there's like a 20, 25 home run bat in there. And you know what? He's got the power behind it, but, he's just really not performed super well this season. And last season was a nice step, and we saw some of the signs of a good player. But like, even if you look at his like minor league stats this year, um, this is not great. And I would say that Edmanuel Valdez is one of those type of players that, if we have the opportunity to maybe move on from him this offseason, I'd consider it, just because he's going to be kind of clogging up the minor league system a little bit and try to recoup any remaining value there might be there. That's what I would recommend. So next up, we've got Ceddanne Rafaela, and I'm going to stick him into exceeds expectations. I'm very tempted to just put him in met expectations, because when you look at his baseline numbers, if you would have told me that he would have ended the season, sitting at 15 home runs, 19 stolen bases, something around like a 250 batting average, I would say that's kind of what I expected from a full season of Ceddanne Rafaela. The only reason I'm sticking him above there is this WAR of 2.8 is really good, and I think that speaks volumes as to just how amazing defensively he is in center field, because he played a bad defensive shortstop this season, and that wasn't really his fault. But if he was just in center field and he was doing what he needed to do defensively, and he was doing this type of season offensively, this is a totally serviceable guy sitting out of like the eight hole. And if that's kind of what he turns into, and he's just like a guy that's going to give you maybe like a 700 OPS, give you 15 to 20 home runs a year, and put up like a 4 WAR season just because of defense, um, that's great. And I think he did a little bit better than I thought he was going to, just in terms of WAR when you consider how bad defensively he was at shortstop. Next up, we've got Tyler O'Neill, and he's going just above Ceddanne Rafaela here and exceeds expectations. Now, the reason I say that too is, again, I'm almost tempted to put him in met expectations, but you can't really expect a guy who hasn't hit 30 home runs in like 3 seasons to hit 30 home runs. And yes, he's been hurt those past couple of years, but at the same time, this is like the second best season of his career. And if you were to say, hey, I'm expecting him to hit 30 home runs this year, I don't think that's very fair. Now, if you were to tell me he was going to play in 113 games this year, I would say, yeah, he's probably going to hit 20, 25 home runs. But to hit 31, it is pretty impressive. Now, the rest of his stats, they're not as great. Like, he doesn't have a whole lot of, like, gap power. He really just is, like, swinging to get a hold of one. He did walk more than he ever has in his career, which was pretty nice. But yeah, I mean, it's a very good season from Tyler O'Neill. I'm thankful for what he did for the team. I don't know if I'd bring him back, but I think he did exceed expectations for what you realistically were hoping for from him. Okay, next up we've got Dom Smith here, and Dom Smith is going firmly into met expectations. Now, Dom Smith came in and he was here to replace Tristan Casas, right? He came in like playing in the minor leagues in Tampa Bay, and let's look at his stats for that season so far. So in 21 games, he had like a 712 OPS with 2 home runs. Now, I don't know about you, I didn't feel that great about him coming in to be like our everyday first baseman, and he came in and he was actually replacing Garrett Cooper, who Garrett Cooper was an absolute train wreck, but I wasn't sure what we were going to get out of him, and he didn't do well at all the first like month he was here. But you know what? By the end of it, 6 home runs, 20 doubles is nice, 706 OPS, and he played pretty good defense over at first place. There were times where he was a little suspect, but and then the WAR I feel like doesn't reflect it accurately enough. But in terms of the expectations for what you could hope for from Dom Smith, he did a lot of good things for the Red Sox, and BDSM was a big thing towards the end of his tenure with the team. So I think it's pretty fair to stick him over here in met expectations. because I think he did meet expectations. Next player is Connor Wong. And again, Connor Wong is one of those guys that I'm just going to stick him in meet expectations. He had a really nice season last year. Let's go down here. 9 home runs, 235 batting average, 673 OPS. And he really probably exceeded a lot of people's expectations this season. But at least for me, I was saying at the beginning of the year, I'm like, this is the type of guy that could hit, 15 to 20 home runs potentially based on his power. And the development that I saw from last season, this was just like another natural progression for me. So I think a lot of people would put him in exceeds expectations. And you know what? It might be fair to do so. But I'm sticking kind of at the top of Met expectations for right now because even though that 110 OPS is really nice, that defense was not great. Really, really hurt the team at time. He is a terrible framer. So here, I'll pull this up really quick. One of the worst framers in all of baseball, like legitimately one of the worst framers. While that's not the most important thing, like these savant numbers they don't paint a good picture for him. As a catcher, framing's terrible. Blocks above average is bad. His pop time's okay. Caught stealing, he was like an average player at that. But in reality, like this is not the type of player that you feel like is going to anchor your catching game for a long time. And so I feel like putting him in Met expectations is pretty fair. That's where he's going to stay for right now. He did good. He did really good, but he's just not exceeds for me. Next up, we've got Wilyer Abreu, and I think Wilyer exceeds expectation. Wilyer did really well this season, and earlier this year, I was saying that he was the type of guy that if you were going to tell me he hit 20 to 25, maybe even push 30 home runs at the beginning of the season, that's kind of what I was talking about. And while we didn't see that from the power aspect, I wasn't really expecting him to do that. I wasn't sure what we were going to get out of him. He had a really nice season last year. But again, he was like not really a top prospect, and it's hard to gauge what you're going to kind of get out of that. Now, something that is encouraging about him is his like peripheral metrics are really good, and his defense is obviously outstanding. Like he hits the ball really hard, exit velocity 86th percentile. That's great. His fielding run value 90th percentile. Look at this. Range, outs above average, arm value, arm strength. These are some big boy numbers. Like he is the type of guy that you definitely want to be in the outfield for you playing defensively. And he had some issues with the batting, but let's look at last season here. Like there's the opportunity for him to be potentially like this type of player more consistently. Expected batting average was a little bit higher. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if he can put together a little bit more of what he did offensively, in a limited sample time last year into this year, I mean, we're talking about a guy that could be, like a 5-WAR player. Like that's pretty wild from Wilyer Abreu. I still think he exceeded expectations. He's another one of these fringe type guys like Cedar Rafaela. But, I think that he did exceed my expectations at the end of the day. Next up, we've got Masataka Yoshida. And I almost want to put him in inconclusive, but I think really at the end of the day, he just kind of met expectations. And the reason I almost put him in inconclusive is because he didn't have like a full season. But he played enough games to kind of give you what you thought you were going to get out of him. I think that there's the potential for him to hit 20 plus home runs in the big leagues. We've seen a couple stretches where he's just like pounding the ball. And you know what? He's a really valuable guy to have around. Now, the worst part about Yoshida, obviously, is the defensive aspect for him. He didn't play defense at all this year. Alex Cora, the management team, they kind of feel like that he just can't play defensively over there. And you know what? Maybe he can't. He was honestly terrible last season. But his bat's there, and I think his contract's holding him back. I think that they're going to actively try to shop him this year. It's a bummer, too, because Yoshida's a really fun player to have around. I really enjoy having Yoshida on the team. He's come up with some really big moments for this Red Sox team in the past 2 seasons. But at the same time, there's certain fits for certain players, and he's probably just not the right fit for this team. But he did meet my expectations, for sure. So we got Rafael Devers now, and I think Rafael Devers also exceeded expectations. I was pretty fringy on whether to put him in meet expectations or exceeds, but at the end of the day, he was going to be in greatly overperform for like a large majority of the season. He was having a career year. He had like 1,000 OPS. And really, it was just the last season that kind of brought him down. But at the end, I still think that it deserves some recognition as to what he was able to do. So let's go down to his stats and we'll compare him like year over year. 34 doubles. He had 15 fewer games and he had as many doubles as last season. Still 28 home runs. He walked more than he ever did in his career, which that has been a criticism of him in the past, is that he doesn't walk enough for a player of his caliber. He was walking more than ever this year. He was probably going to walk close to 80 times. That's amazing. And if he can walk 80 times, I don't mind that he set a career high in strikeouts. I really don't. 139 OPS, that's what you want in the middle of the lineup. The guy that's going to terrorize Garrett Cole every single time he sees him, that's what you want in the middle of the lineup. And defensively, he did okay. You know, I think that if Devers doesn't get hurt, we're talking about a guy that's easy over 900 OPS, probably hits 35 home runs plus, maybe even challenges his career high of 38 home runs. He was having a career year this year, and so I think it'd be a disservice to put him below exceeds expectations, even though he has pretty high expectations. Okay, next up we've got David Hamilton, and I'll tell you right now, I almost want to put him in greatly overperformed. Like, seriously, because I had zero expectations of him coming into this season. I didn't think we were going to get anything out of David Hamilton. And when you look at his stats, they actually look pretty good. So he's not going to be in greatly overperformed. He is going to exceeds, but he's going to the very top of exceeds. And let me tell you why. So he finished with 2.7 WAR this season, 8 home runs, 33 stolen bases. I think that was like fifth in the league for stolen bases. But like, just take a look at what he's done like in the minor leagues. And just tell me that this is exactly what you were going to expect from this year. So obviously he's stealing a lot of bases. He had a little bit of power and stuff, but he had a 247 batting average. That's not exactly something that you feel like is going to translate super well to the big leagues, but he basically maintained that batting average from last year going into this year. Still showed a little bit of power, which I didn't think the power was going to be there at all from this year. If you would have told me he had 300 bats, I would have been like, he probably hit 3 home runs. But 8 home runs is nothing to laugh at. If he had a full season, you were talking like 15 home runs. 33 stolen bases, obviously that's insane. And David Hamilton, defensively at shortstop was bad. But at second base, he was okay. He was okay. And honestly, like, I don't know what to do with David Hamilton next season because he's a lefty, but he's a guy that, could be the starting second baseman next year. And honestly, I think he's almost the default starting second baseman based on what he had done this season. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. He obviously exceeded expectations. His value's got to be really high right now. Part of me's torn. I almost feel like we should trade him. But at the same time, our offense was never better than when we had Jarren Duran, Rafael Devers, and Ceddanne Rafaela all clicking throughout the summer. It was incredibly fun to watch. When you had Hamilton batting ninth and then turned over to Jarren Duran, it was just like, it was beautiful to watch when they were hitting well. So he had a great season. He definitely exceeded expectations for me. All right, next up we've got Rob Refsnyder. And Refsnyder, again, I think he's another guy that's exceeds expectations. I don't know. He almost feels like I should put him in meet expectations just because he's kind of done some of this before. And this chart's starting to get very heavy on exceeds. But in reality, Rob Refsnyder, like, he had a really nice season. I wasn't expecting that at all. So 0.8 WAR, it's not great. He's not an amazing defensive outfielder or anything. But 11 home runs, 283 batting average, a 129 OPS. Like, he did his job and more, which is to hit lefties hard. I mean, we're looking at the season. This was the best season of his career, really. 2022, obviously, 307 batting average, 881 OPS. That's when he really solidified himself as a part of this team. And he had that really nice extension after that year, which was great for him. But, 830 OPS in this amount of games, 93 games, like, he was batting third for the Red Sox this season. So I think it's hard not to stick him in exceeds expectations. And I hear word that he might retire this next season. I think he's got an option, a 1 year. He's got a 2025 team option. I would be shocked if the Red Sox didn't pick that up. But again, if he retires, he's obviously not gonna be on the team this next year. But really nice little contract. Rob Refsnyder's a leader in the clubhouse. I think he exceeded my expectations this year. I wasn't sure that he was going to come back and do this again after last year, but yeah, he did awesome. All right, next up we've got Triston Casas, and he's going to be the first one that goes an inconclusive right here. Now, I think Casas potentially could have been like an exceeds, and if you look at his baseline value, he probably met expectations. Like, that's where I'd stick him. But obviously, he just really didn't play enough this season to kind of give you a good gauge as to what you were going to get out of him. He started the season super hot, came back off the injured list, played okay for a few games, and then was ice cold. And then finished the season on a little bit of a strong note. So finished the year with an 800 OPS, which is great. I'm glad he was able to get to that benchmark. That's nice. 13 home runs, 241 batting average, 800 OPS. Nice amount of walks. Striking out a little bit more than we want him to. But you know what? If you extrapolate this out to like a full season, that's a 30 home run season. And I think that he's a 30 home run bat if he's healthy. He's going to be a middle of the order guy. He's going to be batting, third, fourth, fifth for a long time for this team. Ideally, this is probably a meet expectations type year, but we're just going to stick him in inconclusive for right now just because I just don't think he has enough of at bats to really quantify on any of these categories. So, all right, next up we've got Jarren Duran, and I don't think there's any question where he's going. Jarren Duran, let's take a minute. We got to gush on Jarren Duran here for a second. I'll take the L on this one. I wanted to trade Jarren Duran this last offseason. I was concerned about his mental health a little bit more than I think a lot of other people were, but I was like, I don't know if this guy's going to be able to maintain what he did last season. He had a really nice season last year, 295 batting average, 828 OPS. I'm like, let's trade him. Maybe we can get some starting pitching. I actually thought we should get him for Ha-Seong Kim from the Padres. That was like a trade that I was kind of thinking, I'm like, that might work out for both parties. But you know what? Amazing season from Jarren Duran. One of the best seasons ever. I'm going to make a video talking about this. He is going to be like fourth place in MVP voting probably this year, behind Jose Ramirez, Bobby Witt Jr., and Aaron Judge. But he might have had the best fourth place MVP season like in the last 50 years. And we'll break that down a little bit more later on. But incredible season, 21 home runs, 34 stolen bases. He would have stolen 50 bases. I'm telling you right now, if he didn't get told to like chill out. Alex Cora and co, they were all like, listen, you're going to hurt yourself. You're stealing a lot. You're doing great things, but he toned it back a lot. And in some ways, I think that coincided with him struggling a lot. It kind of took him out of his own little groove, in my opinion. But 8.7 WAR, this is crazy. Defensively, like, let's actually pull this up because we need to look at just this metrics. Look how much red is on here. He was the best base runner in baseball this season. Number one, like the best 100th percentile, fielding top 5%, batting run value top 12%. Like, I don't know what else you could ask from this guy, but he was the best player on this team this year, easily. The most important player on this team this year by far. I don't know what he's going to do next season. I find it very difficult to believe that he's going to put up another 8 WAR season next year. But if he comes back and gives you another, 6+ WAR going into next year, that's legit. Like, he's a legit, perennial all-star type player if he's doing that. I'm glad to take the L on this. I'm glad we made the mistake. I'm very proud of Jarren Duran. I love him. He's a great guy to have around, and he's made some mistakes, but you know what? He's definitely a leader on this team, offensively, defensively. I'm glad he's part of the team. So next up, we've got Romy Gonzalez, and again, he's just another guy that's an exceeds. This isn't exactly how this is supposed to be designed, but I think it's going to level out a lot more as we get through this list. But if you're telling me you were expecting this from Romy, you're probably wrong. I wasn't expecting anything from the guy. I thought he was just going to be picked up in kind of like a flyer. I was excited as to what he was doing at the beginning of the season. I'm like, dude, let's give him a shot. But, he was hurt last season, didn't do well at all. I thought he was kind of like, well, let's pick him up and see how he does. And to be honest, like, he's a guy that's going to be on this roster probably for the next few years unless he gets dealt. But I don't even think he's like a minor league depth guy. He's very important to this team this season. He only put up a single WAR, and he had 200 bats. So that's not like, this isn't like the best looking line, but 6 home runs, 266 batting average, 11 stolen bases, perfectly league average hitter. But if you guys watch this season, you know that Romy did better than this. It felt like he was just contributing on a daily basis, and defensively, he was very serviceable to good, like across the diamond. I think that he did awesome. He exceeded my expectations because I didn't have any expectations of him. Like, he definitely overperformed that. All right, so Trevor Story is also going to go into inconclusive here. I was very hyped on Trevor Story preseason, and you know what? I'm probably going to be hyped on him next season too. Trevor Story might be the most important player on the Red Sox to be in the lineup every single day. I'm not saying he's the most important player on the team, but like just to be there for consistency's sake. When he went down, the defense on the team fell apart completely. This is the worst defensive team in baseball. And it's because Trevor Story went down. Like, if he was here, I honestly believe that the Red Sox probably would have had 20 less errors this season. The reason I say this specifically is because he is just invaluable at keeping people in their positions. Like, imagine if you had an outfield of Ceddanne Rafaela, Jarren Duran, and Wilyer Abreu all season. Tyler O'Neill made a lot of little mistakes, things that don't show up on paper. He was a below-average defensive player, which it was kind of surprising because he was actually above average when he was with the Cardinals. But Trevor Story is like one of the better defensive shortstops in the league. And we had the worst defensive shortstops in the league this year. Like, it was not even close. So I think that if you're looking at him on a full season, you want Trevor Story to be here. He's going to probably bat you like 250. That seems about right. But you want maybe 20 home runs out of him. He stole a little bit. I mean, that's encouraging. He hasn't really stolen much in the past few seasons with the Red Sox. I mean, not a ton. 13 stolen bases, like that's a little bit, but 6 stolen bases in this amount of time. I mean, he was on pace to, steal like 20, 30 plus. Which I didn't expect to see out of him. But he's one of the most important guys in the Red Sox, and if he's on this roster next season, it's gonna be really interesting with like Marcelo Meyer coming up and some of these other young guys. But as of right now, he's like the most important everyday, day-to-day player to be there, and be there 5-6 days a week at least. All right, next up we've got Danny Jansen, and he is definitely in below expectations. I didn't have a whole lot of expectations of him to begin with, but I thought he was going to come in and at least do something close to what he did in Toronto. Was hoping for a little bit more, and he went downhill. 188 batting average, not good. 300 slugging percentage, 623 OPS. If you were going to say some good things about him defensively, he was significantly better than Connor Wong. But in reality, like Danny Jansen offensively was not giving you a lot. Now defensively though, it was nice having him there. Connor Wong, we talked about that just a little bit ago. He is absolutely terrible at framing the ball. But Danny Jansen here, on the other hand, defensively is pretty decent. Actually, I mean, he felt decent. He felt better than Connor Wong at least. But he's below average. Don't need to spend too much time on that. Next up, we've got Bobby Dahlbeck, and yeah, obviously below expectations for him. I had very little expectation of him to begin with, which is not good considering he's still in below expectations. I for sure, beginning of the season, like he's getting designated for assignment. There's no way he's gonna be able to stay on this roster this year. He's just absolutely cooked as a player. He's totally done. Let's look at his stats real quick, just to kind of memorialize him. I mean, negative .8 WAR, a 16 OPS plus. I can't remember the last time I've seen it that low. A single home run, I remember like that was like a thing, trying to see if he's actually going to hit a home run. 410 OPS. This is bad. I knew it was going to be bad, but I'm like, well, maybe he'll give you like a 600 OPS if he plays, and they'll keep him around for a little bit. They kept him around for way too long, and obviously there wasn't a whole lot of option at the time, but between him and like Garrett Cooper and Casas going down in the early time of Dom Smith, it was really bad at first base for the Red Sox for a while, and he was a big part of it. So, rip Bobby. We'll see you around maybe. All right, next up we've got Nick Sogard, and I think he met expectations pretty well. I mean, he fits very well into that category in my opinion. Came up, did what he was asked to do. He gave you a 273 batting average, 650 OPS, and a 82 OPS plus. Had like no power, which is a little bit surprising because he does have a little bit of power if you look at his minor league stats. He was showing it a little bit more this season, but his bread and butter was like, hey, he's like a defensive guy and he's just going to go out there and do good things for you every single day. And if you watched him play, like I was very comfortable having him in the lineup. He feels like the type of guy that like you just want him off the bench. Like he's going to come up, he's going to get you some hits. He's going to play a solid defensive position across the diamond. I don't know. If he was a bench guy for this team, he's a switch hitter. It's really nice to have that type of guy just floating around. And I think that he's going to be up and down probably next season between AAA and the majors. I think he's a really nice depth guy. He's going to be up and down when injury happens. And, he might just stick, but he performed well. And I was very happy to see what we saw out of Nick Sogard this year. All right, next up we've got Garrett Cooper, and he is the first one to go in well below expectations. Pretty deservingly so, in my opinion. I had some sort of expectation from Garrett Cooper this year. I actually thought he was going to do pretty well. His swing kind of caters to Fenway Park okay, and he was designated for assignment from the Cubs early in the season, and he batted 270, had a 774 OPS, was doing pretty well, and still got designated for assignment just because of like roster issues. And so I was like, well, if he can do this in Boston, like that's pretty good. But I mean, obviously in 24 games, like the dude had 4 extra base hits. He had 12 total hits and 70 at bats. It was just striking out a lot. Didn't walk. Like it was miserable having to watch Garrett Cooper play. And I was with it the whole time. And I was like, let's give him a week. Let's give him 2 weeks. And then it was just like, this ain't working out. So definitely well below average here. And yeah, not what I expected for sure. All right, I think this is the last position player that we have on the list. And we got Pablo Reyes here. I'm going to stick him in below expectations as well. I didn't have high expectations of him either. I actually also said at the beginning of the season. I'm like, this guy's going to get designated for assignment. That's how I felt about it. I really didn't think he was going to be able to maintain what he did last year, and what he did last year was actually really good. 287 batting average, 716 OPS. You know, he had some big hits. That walk-off grand slam was awesome last year. But I was just looking at it and I'm like, he's never performed well in his career. I don't think he's going to be able to improve upon this. So best case scenario, he's going to maintain it. And when I was thinking, I'm like, is he actually going to maintain this? I'm like, no, probably not. Yeah, I think after he gets signed on, let's see what he did in the minors this year. 300, actually, that's really good. So, you know, 300 batting average, 889 OPS. Hopefully he gets another shot, but you know, he's getting up there in age. He just seems like the type of guy that's going to kind of sort of age out and not really make an impact at the major league level again. But I'm rooting for him. He was a fun guy to have last season. It's just, you know, he didn't meet those expectations this year. All right, so before we jump forward, this is like the offense so far, and so just by looking at this, the offense did pretty good, in my opinion. Like, we had a lot of guys that exceeded expectations, one guy that greatly overperformed expectations, and some guys that were below average. But I think a lot of these guys that were below average, you kind of didn't have super high expectations of them to begin with. So across the board, like the offense, like everybody who you thought was going to post at least did what you wanted them to do. And best case scenario, you had like most of the offense actually, you know, the day to day guys, they exceeded expectations, at least in my opinion. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but just wanted to take a quick pause there before we jumped into the pitching side of it because I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, first up on the pitching side, we got Cutter Crawford, and I think he met expectations. I think heading into this season, I was like, this guy's going to be a solid 4 or 5 guy in the rotation, and he pretty much did that. It's kind of a bummer, though, because like Cutter Crawford at the beginning of the season was like legitimately the best starter in baseball. Like, it's kind of weird to think about that, but he for sure was. Like, let me look at the game logs really fast here. Look at this at the beginning of the year. He had a 175 ERA heading into May 1st. Like 175. That's crazy. That's insane to me. Um, he only had one start where he gave up more than 2 earned runs, and like he had under a 1 ERA 5 starts in the season. Like he was a Cy Young candidate heading into May, and obviously the rest of the year it just didn't go super well. So like let's see what we got here. A 5.24 ERA. Like this is not great. After the beginning of the season, like we lost most of the starts that he went through. We only won 7 out of the 22 starts. So, like overall, just didn't end up great. But if you were talking about him as a whole, beginning of the season, like what are you going to get out of him? And you were going to say, hey, you know, we're going to get 2 WAR out of him. He's going to give you a 4.36 ERA, and he's going to start 33 games. Like he had 183 innings pitched. Like that's nothing to laugh at. And if we can get, you know, this as like a more consistent type performance out of him next year, I will take that from a number 5 starter in the rotation, 100%. But the problem is he was elevated to be like a number 2 or number 3 for a lot of the year, and that's just not going to cut it. We need more starting pitching. So that's not his fault. He still had a really solid season. All right, next up we've got Tanner Houck, and he absolutely exceeded expectations. I'm going to stick him a little bit further up here. If he kept up what he was doing at the beginning of this year, he 100% would have been and greatly overperformed. But I think that, you know, he's near the top of this exceeds expectations list for sure. He had an awesome year. I mean, 3.5 WAR, 3.12 ERA, 30 starts, almost pitched 180 innings. Was an all-star this season. Like he did awesome. And I wish he was able to maintain what he did in the first half because obviously he fell off pretty sharply in the second half. But you know, he ended the season okay. He had a really nice end of the season start, 5 innings pitched, didn't give up a single earned run, just a single hit. And the last couple starts were pretty solid. So hopefully he can carry that over into next season. But Tanner Houck is like, he's probably developed into like a number 2 guy. Like I was hoping for this type of breakout from Brian Bayo this season, and we got it from Tanner Houck. So I was kind of right about the breakout, but I was wrong about the player, which I guess doesn't count at all. But really nice to see from him. He's just got like that demeanor on the mound that reminds me a lot of Chris Sale, where he's just like, he just doesn't like give a shit. Like he's going to come out there, he's going to do what he needs to do, and he's not really phased by a whole lot. So it's really nice to see, and hopefully we can get an ace in front of him because while he performed like an ace all season this year, I don't think he is that ace. I think he's the guy that you want to be your number 2 or that really, really excellent number 3 guy in your rotation. But no, awesome season from Tanner Houck. He absolutely exceeded expectations for me. All right, next up we've got Brian Bayo, and he's an easy below expectations for me. I almost want to put him in well below, but that's a little unfair. He didn't have that bad of a season overall. and he did okay towards the end of the year, but 1.5 WAR, 4.49 ERA. He did pitch 30 starts, which is good. 162 innings pitched, which means that he qualified for like all of the titles and stuff. But yeah, this is just not a great season from him. I made a video talking about how I thought that he was going to become like potentially like a Johnny Cueto type pitcher, and I thought that he was going to take a step forward this year. And I still believe he has that potential in him. It's too early to give up on that, but at the end of the day, like we were hoping he was going to be closer to that number two type guy, kind of what Tanner Houck did. And he took a step back, and he pitched like a number five this year. And we really need him to be at least like a number three type guy to make this contract worth it and for us to just have stabilization in the rotation. So hopefully we get more out of Bello next season. I'm encouraged by some of the things that I saw, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, definitely below what I expected this year. All right, next up we've got Nick Pivetta, and he is also just straight in that met expectations category. If you look at what Pivetta did this season, 4.14 ERA, mostly pitched out of the rotation, 145 innings pitched. Obviously, terrible win-loss ratio here, but you know what? He actually did better than I think a lot of people think he did. It's nice to get the innings out of him. I'm bummed out that this is probably the last time we're going to have him on the Red Sox, because honestly, like, he's a very nice guy to have in that middle to back end of the rotation. Because what I think you get out of Nick Pivetta that you don't get out of like every starting pitcher is, while he is kind of like a mid to back of the rotation type guy, in big moments he can pitch like an ace. Like, he can straight up dominate. Twice this season he had 8 strikeouts in a row, like twice. That's pretty weird, pretty wild. 172 strikeouts in 145 innings. Like, if there's a big moment on the mound, it wouldn't be surprising if Nick Pivetta was there for it. The biggest issue has always been his home runs. Like, he just gets nuked at times, and I think Fenway Park's not the best ballpark for him. But if you were to tell me that this guy's going to go out and have close to like a 3 ERA at some point next season, like, I know he's on the wrong side of 30, but he's got that dog in him. And as long as he's in the right ballpark, you tell me he's got like a 3.3, 3.5 ERA and, pitches 180 innings and gives you 200 strikeouts, like, would not shock me at all from him. So solid season from Nick Pivetta. He met expectations, but didn't do much else outside of that. All right, so for Cooper Criswell, I think he also fits in that meet expectations category. I didn't have hardly any expectation from him this season, but he was a very nice, shrewd pickup by Craig Breslow here. He did his job pretty well. Like, he pitched out of the rotation a lot, which I hope he doesn't have to do next season because he's not pitching at length. But I mean, a 4.08 ERA, he gave you 100 innings, a little bit above average pitcher. I mean, I'm almost tempted to put in exceeds expectations because, again, I didn't have any expectations from him. But at the end of the day, these are pretty average numbers, and you know, he did what we asked him to do. He posted and was a contributor to the team positively for the most part this season, and so I think that qualifies pretty straightforward for met expectations. All right, next up we've got Kenley Jansen, and I'm going to stick him right here in meet expectations. I definitely think he did what you asked him to do. Like, if you guys remember back in 2022 when we didn't have a closer, it was bad. And Kenley Jansen, there were some times where he's inconsistent this year, but he also had a long stretch where he was totally dominant. And the last couple seasons, has he been the best closer in the league? No. But was he an all-star last season? Could he have been one this year? Yeah, totally. And you know what? He did his job. Like, he did what you were asking him to do. He solidified the ninth inning for the most part. Got you the saves that you were hoping he would get. It's just he didn't have as many opportunities, and obviously he was frustrated at the end of the season that he didn't get to make the postseason the last couple of years. But no, I totally think Jansen did what you asked him to do, and I hope we have some sort of option for next season for like a stable closer, because if we're just going to be mixing and matching again, like, it's going to be 2022 all over again, where we're just like, damn, we're blowing every single save here because we have nobody who can actually record an out in the ninth inning. So next up, we've got Greg Weissart, and I'm also going to put him in met expectations, but I'm going to stick him like right here in the middle. I think he's like exactly what you wanted from Greg Weissart is what you got. I thought at the beginning of this year, I actually put him as one of my players to like watch as a potential breakout guy, and there were times where he kind of did that. But if you look at him, I mean, he pitched a lot this year. 62 games, 63 innings pitched, 137 ERA plus. Like, honestly, like, if that's what you were going to get out of Greg Weissart coming into this season, I think a lot of you guys take it. There's a lot of fans out there also that I think look at Weissart and they're like, man, he sucks. He he blew it in big moments. Then he had some issues with like inherited runners, I know at times, but overall, like these stats, they're pretty good. I mean, he's a well above average reliever is what he did at the major leagues, and the only reason he's sticking to meet expectations is because I kind of expected him to perform something similar this way, and so this is a call out for me. I think that's a big win. I took my L's earlier. This is a win for me, but no, he definitely met what I was expecting him to do this year, and hopefully he can build on that for next year. Zach Kelly's another one of those guys that I think you can just stick firmly into the meet expectations category. Because again, I didn't really have a whole lot of expectations from him. Like he pitched a little bit last season, the past few years, but he really wasn't like a main piece of this bullpen until this season. And he pitched, kind of average. Like he's one of those guys that if he's coming out of the fifth or sixth inning, you feel okay about. But there were a lot of times this year that he was forced to come out in like the eighth inning. And, that's not his place in this rotation in this bullpen. I mean, if you can have him as a guy that's like, hey, he's your first reliever out of the bullpen when there's a short start, I feel good about Zach Kelly. But if he's the type of guy that's going to have to come out and be one of those later inning guys right now, that's the sign of a weak bullpen. And at times, this bullpen was really weak. So I guess that makes sense. But Zach Kelly did pretty well this season. I think he met expectations. I didn't have a whole lot of them. And hopefully he can build for that for next season. All right, next up we got Brennan Bernardino, and I actually think I'm going to stick him in below expectations here. Move some of these guys around real quick. I'll put him at the top of below expectations, but maybe that's a little bit harsh on him. But how he performed last season, I definitely thought he was taking a step in the direction to be like a dominant type reliever out of the bullpen, and he kind of was just like a very average, below average type reliever for a lot of the year. Definitely struggled large portions of the season. Had some good moments, but like last season, 55 games, 50 innings pitched, 143 ERA plus, 320 ERA. I was kind of expecting a similar type season from him this year. Definitely took a little bit of a step backwards. Not awful to the point where like we need him off the roster, but he needs to be able to rebound and at least get somewhere in the middle of like these two seasons here. So I think that that's a below average season from what I was expecting from him. Obviously, he's a late bloomer, so kind of remains to be seen if he'll be like sticking around for the long term. But like the walks were a little bit too high, and I think that's kind of what killed him is he was just walking too many people for the most part this season. So if he can kind of control that a little bit better and get that back to what he was doing in 2023, I think he'll be a very serviceable guy out of the bullpen, like earlier in the game in the sixth inning or so. Next up, we've got Chris Martin, and I'm also going to stick him in below expectations. And this is, again, maybe a little bit unfair. I'm going to put him at the very, very tippy top here because he was so close to just meeting expectations for me. Obviously, his last season, 2023, was insanely good. He got Cy Young votes last season. I for sure knew that wasn't going to happen. And I thought we should sell high on him, maybe this last offseason. But I understood keeping him because obviously you're trying to compete in 2024. But I'm just like, there's no way he's going to be able to have a higher value than he does right now. But I still thought he was going to have, maybe like a 2.53-ish ERA, take a pretty solid step back, but not like a huge step back. But honestly, there were just a lot of times where he was very inconsistent this year. There were also other times where he was extremely dominant. But 124 ERA plus, obviously, that's not the same thing as a 434 ERA plus, but he's still a very serviceable guy. I felt pretty good about him coming out of the seventh inning a lot of the year, seventh, eighth inning. But if he does this again, like next season for whatever team, I don't know if he's the type of guy you want coming out of the eighth inning consistently. I don't know. I'd be fine with keeping him. He was a nice guy to have around, veteran presence out of the bullpen. He did solid, just below my expectations. Next up, we've got Josh Winkowski. He's another one of those guys that I think he is just in the below expectations category. I don't 100% think it's his fault, though. He was kind of pushed around between AAA and the major leagues a lot this season, especially early in the season. I didn't think that was super fair because he did okay and still was getting sent down just due to like roster issues. But look what he did last year, 2.88 ERA, 84 innings pitched. He was a really stabilizing force out of the bullpen, pitched multi-innings very consistently. And I think that's the role that best suited for him. I don't think that these numbers necessarily indicated what he was going to do for this year. I was more expecting like a 3.5 type ERA kind of guy. But again, 4.14, that's pretty high up there. That's, a very average type reliever season, 103 ERA plus. He's what you would have wanted from like a Chase Anderson or a Brad Keller type season, which obviously those did not go well. But I still think it's a little bit below what I expected and hoped for him. He's still really young, can rebound, He pitched pretty well at AAA this season. He was starting more. He got some starts at the end of this season, so could he be a starter? I don't think I'd want him as a starter, but he's a nice guy to have as an option for like a spot start. So, all right, next up we got Justin Slayton, and Slayton's totally going into exceeds expectations. I think he's only like the second pitcher to go up there, but Slayton totally crushed it this season. 2.93 ERA. We picked him up like in a Rule 5 trade, which is insane. I think he was drafted by like the Mets in the Rule 5 draft, and we traded for him for like nothing. But 44 games, 55 innings pitched this year, 58 strikeouts, a 146 ERA plus. Like from a Rule 5 guy to being maybe the second, third most important piece out of the bullpen, like it's easy exceeds expectations for me. Slayton's totally a guy that I hope that will continue to improve upon that next season. Obviously, in the minors in 2023, he did super well. And if he can just maintain some of what he did this season into next year, he's going to be a really viable, good piece out of the bullpen. And something that I've always really liked and appreciated from him is he just doesn't walk people. Like he just goes after guys. And that's what I like to see out of the bullpen because nothing drives me more crazy than when like a starter leads the game and then the bullpen just comes in and starts walking guys. I hate that. I hate that so much. And he just doesn't do that. Good job, Slayton. Amazing job on acquiring him. This is a big credit to like Craig Breslow and the front office. This is the type of move that you want to see to be able to like solidify the bullpen and other pieces of the roster. Definitely exceeded expectations for me. All right, next up we've got Chase Anderson, and yeah, Chase Anderson, not good. I did not have expectations from him, I'll tell you that. And so for him to still end up in well below expected, um, that's telling you something. He stunk this season. He had a 4.85 ERA, but this is not this is not a good indicator, I feel like, of how bad he was. He felt like every single time he came in, the game was over 100%. And I think that this 89 ERA plus and this 5.59 FIP give a better story onto how it was when he actually came into the game. But he didn't strike out anybody. He was just giving up contact on every situation. It felt like he was just going to blow it. I know he was signed to be like that back of the bullpen, like the last guy in the bullpen to come in and throw you a couple innings when things were kind of lost. I hate that. I hate that. I'd rather you give Josh Winkowski the opportunity than to have Chase Anderson doing this. And if this is the type of person that's going to be signed to be in the back end of the bullpen, there's some issues. You need to have every single guy to be able to come in and be like, all right, this guy's at least going to give you a chance. Didn't feel like that at all with Chase Anderson this season. I hope that we don't have to deal with that next year. So all right, next up we've got Cam Boozer, and he is going straight to exceeds expectations, easy for me. He came out from AAA, and to be honest, he wasn't doing amazing there, but I thought that he was going to be like a guy that, maybe at least going to get some strikeouts. This was super encouraging. I remember at the time, 22 strikeouts and 11 innings pitched, and you know what? He came up and was a very above average reliever for most of the season. He did his job, and for a guy that's 32 years old, making his major league debut. It was super emotional for him. I know his family was there watching him. He did everything that you could really realistically ask of him and a little bit more. For a guy like Cam Boozer, I mean, I'm almost half tempted to put him into like greatly exceeded because like he had zero expectations to begin with. So I think he goes close to like the top of this list. Maybe we'll stick him like here. Maybe Tyler O'Neill did a little better, but it's just extremely impressive what he did this year, and hopefully he can continue that into the next year because you don't always see this from relievers. Sometimes he'll just kind of fade away into obscurity, but even if that does happen, at least he always had this season because he did a great job. Awesome job. All right, next up we got Brad Keller and another Chase Anderson type situation, just well below what you want from that type of guy. He came in this season, had a 5.84 ERA, in 11 games, was another one of those multi-inning guys. Same story as Chase Anderson. It was just like every time Brad Keller came into the game, it was like, yep, this game's over. And that's just how it felt like. 74 ERA plus, 5.07 FIP. I didn't have high expectations of him to begin with either. Again, it's just one of those situations where it's just like a human white flag coming in the game, and I hate when you have that out of the bullpen and they come in. So well below expected for him. All right, now we're getting to like the end of the rotation type guys. These are guys that didn't have a whole lot of innings, but we're still gonna count them. So Richard Fitts, easy, like exceeded expectations. We're gonna put him like very close to the top here, actually. Only had a few starts, 4 starts, but in those 4 starts, he gave you a chance to win in every single one of them. 1.74 ERA, didn't allow a run, an earned run in his first 3 starts. You could probably easily put him into well exceeds, but I think that he just doesn't have enough innings to really give you that. And like, while he performed really well, like he didn't perform like ridiculous, like shocking. Like if he was doing this while pitching 7 innings, he would definitely be up there. But he was doing this while pitching like 5 innings every single outing. So super great. Didn't strike out like anybody, which is kind of weird. But obviously encouraged for what we saw from Richard here. He's going to be part of that rotation mix, but again, I don't know if I really want him in the starting rotation to start next year. He'd be really nice to be able to throw at AAA again and be able to call up if there's an injury. I hope we fill the rotation more instead of just like being like, oh yeah, Richard Fitts. Remember he pitched really well last season? Like we're gonna stick him in there. It's like, well, yeah, he did, but he had 4 starts. So like I'm not really like counting on him to be able to do that over 30 games. So, but good job from him. Exceeded my expectations, absolutely. I think a lot of people felt that way. Garrett Whitlock, I'm actually going to just stick an inconclusive. He only had like 4 starts this season, too. Pitched awesome in those. But again, the Red Sox are utilizing him incorrectly. Like Garrett Whitlock is the guy that you want in that role that Chase Anderson and Brad Keller were doing this season. Like if he's the guy that's coming in and giving you 2 or 3 innings after a starter doesn't do well, then you feel okay. Because if it's like a 5-1, 5-2 game after like 4 innings, say something like that, and you bring in Brad Keller, the game's over. But if you bring in Garrett Whitlock and he pitches you 3 scoreless innings, like the offense could bring you back into it. You're only down by 3 or 4 runs. That's not too bad. But when Brad Keller comes in, he's given up another 2 or 3, and that game's still over. So you want Whitlock to be that guy that's going to be that multi-inning guy that's going to come in and either save a game for you or in that clutch situation to give your offense an opportunity. And for the love of God, please don't put him back in the rotation again because that experiment's just not working. He's not pitching deep enough into games, and out of the bullpen, he's just a dominant type guy. He's always been kind of that guy, but out of the rotation, he's just. I know he did okay this season before he got hurt, but again, he got hurt because he was in the rotation. I think he wouldn't have been hurt if he was out of the bullpen. So inconclusive for him. He was doing really well to start the season, but yeah, this is really just kind of on the front office right now. Next up, we've got Bailey Horn, and while he could pretty easily go into well below expected, I think I'm just going to stick him in the bottom of below expectations because, again, I had 0 expectations of him to begin with. He kind of feels like Manuel Valdez. Well, yeah, I mean, I could stick both of these guys probably in well below, but it's just probably not fair to them just because they had pretty minimal expectations to begin with. So Bailey Horn did not do amazing this year by any means. He, again, could totally qualify for that, but we're not going to spend too much time on this. He's just not a super great pitcher. Like he's just not been that way in the minors, and he's probably one of those guys that hopefully isn't like consistently on the roster moving forward. So I don't know. Good luck to him though. So all right, we got Luis Garcia next. Well below expectations, absolutely. He came in. We were wanting him to be that guy that was like, hey, he's going to pitch at the 7th inning and he's gonna do pretty well for you. And he came in and just got shelled every single time he was out there. Like it was brutal having to watch him pitch. And I guess he had some sort of injury or whatever, but this sucks. Like when you're expecting a guy that's going to give you like a 3.7 ERA, hopefully, and he comes in and gives you an 8. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like well below expectations, obviously. So all right, we got Lucas Sims next, the other acquisition, and I'm putting him at well below expectations as well. I'll put him at the top here. He's like a fringe below expectations because he did not as bad as all of these other guys, but at the same time, this is just not what you were expecting from him. Again, he's the guy that you were like, this guy's going to come out of the 7th inning, do pretty well for us, and he got a 6.43 ERA. Again, obviously, he was pitching a little bit hurt, did a little bit better than Luis Garcia, which isn't saying a whole lot. But again, it was brutal having to watch him a lot of the time. I did feel a little bit better about him in his last couple outings. I think, yeah, like this wasn't that bad, I guess. But at the same time, he's just not what you were wanting. He kind of was a reason that this team fell apart in the second half of the season. So, all right, this guy here is Joely Rodriguez. For those of you that don't know, because we haven't seen him like most this season, but again, he's gonna go in well below expectations either as well. So just not a good season from him. I was kind of hoping he wouldn't be on this roster, but he just stunk it up, man. Like, he didn't do well last season. He actually technically, he improved heading into this year, but like, this guy's just not a major league caliber player. Like, he did okay in the minors, but like, I mean, he actually did pretty well in the minors, but I just had very little faith in him to do anything this season, and that little faith was not rewarded with anything. Like, 5.93 ERA, obviously well below expectations, even though the small expectations I had, very well below it. All right, second to last guy, we got James Paxton here, and he's obviously going to go in inconclusive. You know, he came up and he was doing kind of what you wanted him to do. He was the bearer of some super bad luck with defense in his first couple starts. But even if you look at that, we still have two starts really, because he left like in the first inning of his third start. But 4 ERA, 11 innings pitched. You know, there's not much to really talk about with this, but I think if he was going to give you something in this range, like that's what you were hoping for from him. And obviously, you know, he did all right for the Red Sox last season. But yeah, I mean, this is we were hoping for an average starting pitcher, and he was kind of doing it. So you could put him in met expectations, but I'm just putting him in inconclusive because he just kind of got hurt. Okay, and the very last guy on this list is Luis Guerrero, and even though he only had 10 innings of sample size, which is the minimum, I'm still putting him in exceeds expectations, because this guy just straight up dominated, like in the time that he was here. 10 innings pitched, 6 hits, 0 runs allowed, 9 strikeouts, and 2 walks. 1.97 FIP. Didn't have enough innings to give you an ERA plus, it looks like, but I wasn't really expecting anything from Luis Guerrero this year. I honestly, he's done pretty well in the minor league system, but I don't know enough about him. And I'm going to have to do some research because the guy crushed it in AAA this season, 79 strikeouts and 54 innings pitched. And obviously, he just was amazing at the majors this year. It was great. A lot of fun watching him out of the bullpen. So he seems like the type of guy that's going to be a part of this bullpen next season, potentially. He might not start on the opening day roster, but he's got a shot for sure. If he's going to be one of those guys that, you know, maybe it's just going to come out of nowhere and be one of those back into the bullpen type arms, I would kind of believe it at this point, just because he was outstanding. I mean, the stuff that he showed too, it wasn't just like, oh, his numbers like did well in the 9 appearances that he had. It's like, no, he looked the part. Like, he looked like a dominant reliever. So I don't know. We'll see what we see. All right, everybody. So that's the list. As you guys can see, we only had one player in the greatly overperformed category, but he did so amazing. I think that it's okay if he's the only guy there. There were some other guys, like I said, that potentially could have been put up there. Like, I felt pretty strongly about David Hamilton, but I still think that he just exceeded expectations. It's kind of tough to stick him all the way up there. And there were a lot of guys, though, that exceeded expectations. But again, a lot of these guys were offensive pieces. You only had a couple pitchers in here. And a lot of the guys that were below expectations and well below expectations, those were pitchers. And so this is kind of like a pretty good microcosm of like the team. Like, the pitching underperformed, the offense kind of overperformed, and as a whole, it kind of balanced out to a perfectly average team. So hopefully we get a little bit more into the team next year. I'll do some more breakdown videos on these guys as we head into the next season. But I hope you like this tier list. Let me know if you have any feedback for me. Let me know your opinions on this. Was I wrong? And how you guys felt. Yeah, look forward to getting more stuff out for you. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.